Dr. Jill Stein ran in 2012, and she's running again in 2016. She's run on a progressive platform for reducing student debt, eliminating student debt, addressing healthcare costs, converting from fossil fuels to clean energy, less reliance on defense for jobs. I can go on, but I think she could do a much better job talking about it than I. So please welcome Dr. Jill Stein.
Thank you all so much. Thank you, Tim. Thank you also to Myrna. And thank you also to Rana, who I think helped organize my visit today. And thank you to Jonathan for that wonderful, rousing speech and for running and bringing all your expertise and your wonderful vision for America and our communities and our schools, which are so critical to how we move forward. So it's really very exciting to be here today. I mean, I can't tell you how exciting it is because one thing after another just keeps happening in exactly the right, miraculous way. This election has been so full of unpredictable and outrageous developments, but some of them, have created this transformative moment that we're in. And I think it's anybody's bet right now what direction this goes. Just a quick check. Is this mic where you want it to be? Or was it, It's good. It's working? Okay, all right, great. So yeah, I mean, this is a really transformative moment, and I want to give a big thank you, especially to the people in the Green Party here who've been building the structure for this success for a long time, and who've really done the hard work of maintaining ballot access and getting on the ballot and doing the petition drive, which we are in the midst of right now, and running people for office, getting Myrna elected to school committee. And I want to particularly give you a thank you. So I want to thank the people who've been here, kind of waiting for the time to be right. As Woody Allen says, half of life is showing up, and thanks to the work that you've been doing in the Green Party, we've been here showing up, kind of waiting for the old system to unravel, which is what it's doing now in a very big way. And I also want to really welcome the people who haven't been a part of the Green Party before, who are checking us out, who are coming over into our campaign. And I especially want to thank the people for whom we are now Plan B, who got this incredible head of steam going in Bernie's campaign. So I want to give you a big thank you for what you've done. And the way this is kind of playing out is sort of the best. It's like if you wanted to create a scenario by which you could have a truly revolutionary political breakthrough, this would be exactly how you would plan it, for a kernel of revolution to start in the Democratic Party. And the reason we have a Green Party is because we've seen this too many times before, that the Democratic Party will do a fake left, go right strategy. It will allow these very inspired, principled campaigns to stand up and be seen and heard, and for people to have the sense that, oh, that must be the face of the Democratic Party. But then the party will destroy that campaign, as it very much sabotaged Bernie Sanders through Super Tuesdays and super delegates, and through stripping of the voter rolls in Brooklyn, and then the uncounted votes in California, and manipulation of the conventions like in Nevada, and manipulating the press through their incredible capacity to do that. They were really able to consistently tilt the playing field and make the Sanders voters feel like, oh, it was kind of hopeless anyhow, and at strategic times just really pull the rug out from under the campaign. This is what they've been doing, back ever since George McGovern won the Democratic nomination as a grassroots candidate. They changed the rules to basically steeply tilt the playing field with the superdelegates and the Super Tuesdays. Dennis Kucinich got redistricted, had his seat basically taken out from under him by the party. Howard Dean, as a peace candidate, had the Dean Scream. Anybody remember that crazy, preposterous PR smear campaign? Same thing was done to Jesse Jackson. You know, and each time this happens, the candidate tries to maintain the momentum by having some kind of follow-up campaign within the party, which all basically kind of goes up in smoke. And in the meantime, the party continues to march to the right, becoming more corporatist, militarist, and imperialist by the year. So if you had to plan a scenario that could leverage all the resources of the Democratic Party to lift up a revolutionary agenda and build the momentum, you know, starting the Bernie campaign was exactly the way to do it. And for him to have thrown in the towel at this point is kind of incredible, because it actually allows for the handoff to take place and for us to start building now. So I really want to assure everyone who was a part of creating that Bernie revolution, first I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for working as hard as you did. And I know the feeling in the Bernie movement is, you know, there's kind of a sense of grieving right now and of, you know, just distress that, boom, where did it go? But I want to assure you that it's not going to lose one step here. And in fact, you can think of that revolution as being liberated now from the constraints of the Democratic Party that never would allow it to prevail no matter what. So now you've got a great thing going, and now we can join forces, because a revolutionary campaign needs a revolutionary political party, and that's what we bring to the table today. So above all, a big thank you for all that. The second thing I want to put on the table right now is to assure you not only does this revolution go on, but that this revolution has the power. We have transformative power right now, and you know, people will tell you that, oh, why bother? You're just kind of the fringe. You're not really going to change things. Well, we know that's not true, because polls tell us one after the other that people have rejected the current political system. They have rejected the rigged economy, they have rejected the rigged political parties, and they have rejected the candidates of those rigged political parties who have the highest rates of dislike and disapproval and distrust of any candidates throughout history. So there couldn't be a better moment for change. An article, actually a poll came out about 3 weeks ago. It was an AP poll that showed it was 90% of Americans that have essentially lost faith in our political system now. And those numbers divided down, it's 25% that have strong confidence in our Supreme Court. It's 15% that have confidence in the White House and the executive, and it's 4% that have confidence in Congress. So if that doesn't tell you that people are ready for change, what does? Members of the press, with whom I've really been having wonderful conversations recently, often begin with this question, you know, how can you accomplish anything beyond taking votes away from Hillary Clinton? And you know, just for all of you to be armed with answers, I'm sure you're all being asked those questions right now. But one answer is that since when do we have a new form of entitlement for politicians, that they are entitled to our votes? They have to earn our votes. If Hillary Clinton can't earn our votes, she doesn't deserve our votes. We are not taking them. And then there's the question, who exactly is it that's talking about spoiling the election or splitting the vote? Because most voters are not talking about that. Yes, there is a substantial number of Democrats who are talking about that, but Democrats are the minority. According to the latest Wall Street Journal poll done last summer, 50% of Americans have rejected both of the major parties. Republicans amount to 21% of the electorate, and Democrats are 29% of the electorate. Most voters are clamoring for something other than those two candidates. The ones who are trying to defend the established system and the prevailing order are a small minority, and they tend to be the people who have a vested interest. They are the party operatives, or they are members of the press who have a good secure niche as a Democratic Party commentator. That's where the drive is coming from that tells us that we are, bad little boys and girls for standing up against this predatory system. In fact, most people are standing up against this predatory political system. So we are in very good company. And those are just two more of the responses that you can have ready for this question about, are we going to spoil the election? But I want to address specifically first, we'll come back to that, because that really is the elephant in the room, the fear factor. Otherwise, everybody would be voting green right now, because everybody needs jobs. Everybody needs a good school system that's fully funded and that meets our needs for public education, and so on. It's really the fear factor. So we'll come back to that in a minute. But first, on this question of power, I want to make sure that when you walk out of here today, you really understand how very eminently possible it is for us to win the day. And there are many ways for us to win the day, but we can win the day in terms of the numbers of winning this vote. There are 42 million people, millennials and older, who are locked into predatory student loan debt. Many people with hair my color who are having that debt deducted from their Social Security payments that hardly keep a roof over their heads to start with. They too are paying student debt because our economy for some decades has not allowed people to repay that debt. But recently that debt has become more predatory and the economy has continued to tank. So currently now, the entire younger generation is locked into this student loan debt without real hope for the economy changing to be able to repay that debt. So the key point here is that 42 million people who don't have a future under the current system, who don't have a place to live of their own, who cannot start a family. The birth rate is plummeting. This is a human rights disaster. An entire generation that has really been denied a decent future. They don't have a place to put their vote except the candidate that you are looking at right now who will cancel that student debt. We bailed out the crooks on Wall Street who crashed the economy with their illegal waste, fraud, and abuse. We bailed them out in many different ways, but that included $4.5 trillion in what's called a quantitative easing, which is basically a magic trick that the Federal Reserve can do. We bailed them out, so it's about time to bail out the victims of that debt, the younger generation trapped in predatory student loan. And the really cool thing about this, as tragic a situation as it is, but that 42 million people is enough to win a three-way presidential race. So if you catch my drift here, just by getting the word out, and who is better positioned to do that than the millennial generation, using what they do very well on social media, we can alert every millennial out there and all the others in student debt and a member of their family. If everybody in student debt also brings out a sympathetic family member to vote green in 2016, we have enough votes not only to win a three-way race, we can win a two-way race with the number of people who will be coming out to cancel that student debt. So we do have the power here. Don't for a minute let them tell you we don't. It's all about getting the word out so that friends don't let friends stay home in student debt. We can actually take over the election. And in doing so, we not only take it over to cancel student debt, there's a whole agenda of justice that millennials tend to carry these days because they have been victimized not only in terms of student debt, but more generally. They have been the latest cash cow for a predatory economy. So it's the skyrocketing cost of education. It's also the skyrocketing cost of housing, which is being gentrified right out from under us. It's the skyrocketing cost of health care. 1 in 3 Americans, despite Obamacare, still cannot afford to get health care even if they have health insurance because the copays and so on are so steep. So the younger generation comes to this with a whole agenda of justice. And who is it that's actually leading the charge for Black Lives Matter, for ending police violence, for ensuring that immigrant rights are respected as human rights? Who's leading the charge for climate justice and ending environmental racism and climate injustice as a whole? That too is being led by the younger generation. This is just kind of, it comes with the territory, no pressure, but this is kind of what young people do, is stand up and envision the world that's ahead of us instead of the world that's behind us. And, you know, actually have the courage of their convictions to stand up and change the world in the way that it must be changed. So by liberating this generation from predatory student loan debt, we not only fix the economy. This isn't just something that we're doing for them, although that's deserved in and of itself, but this is something we're doing for all of us, because our economy cannot move forward with yesterday's vision. And tomorrow's vision depends on today's generation of younger people who have always been a part of recreating and re-envisioning the economy of the future. So we need to liberate people so that they can do the work they've been trained in. There is no better stimulus package for our economy than canceling student debt and liberating people to actually start the small businesses or the nonprofits or the worker cooperatives that we need in all areas of the economy. So this is like the stimulus package of our dreams. This argument, you know, in many ways this is the elephant in the room, and it's so compelling that even Fox News was persuaded of this. I don't know if anybody saw my interview with Mornings with Maria, which was several interviewers, and when you're doing these things at remote stations, you don't see them, so it's like you're blindfolded and they're coming at you from all sides and you don't exactly know who's saying what. It was all women. And you know, the issue though is so compelling and so powerful that when we were done, they sent out a tweet saying, you know, with the link saying, and we could even cancel student debt and have an incredible stimulus package that wouldn't cost taxpayers a dime, which is actually true. It wouldn't, because quantitative easing is just a magic trick, and it cancels debt digitally. Essentially, it expands the money supply if you wanted to go into the weeds of how it works. But expand, you know, money, what is money? Money is a social contract. So we can expand the money supply. The problem is when, if you do that too much, then it's very inflationary. But if you are doing that in a way that actually improves the economy and makes it more productive, it's a great thing to do. So anyhow, Fox was persuaded of this too in the 7 minutes or so of this interview. So it's a really compelling issue out there. It really is the elephant in the room. And by liberating this generation, as I was saying, we also create the momentum for a whole agenda of justice, a whole spectrum of justice. So it's not only ending student debt, it's making public higher education free, which it should be. It pays for itself. That's how we pay for it. For every dollar we put in, we get back $7 in return. And there are many people out there nodding their heads who know, because back in our day, that's what we did. We provided free public higher education for a lot of people. And after the Second World War, we provided it to all returning soldiers. For every dollar we put in, we got back $7 in return. So it pays for itself many times over. We also can create then the momentum for a Green New Deal to address our economic emergency, because we don't have a recovery, maybe for the 1%, but who thinks we're in a recovery out there? Yeah, not very many people in my experience, nobody I'm seeing on the campaign trail. So we can address that emergency by creating a new deal like what got us out of the Great Depression, but it's green, so it also addresses our climate emergency. 20 million jobs to transform our energy, our food supply, and our public transportation, and also to rebuild infrastructure like our ecosystems. This revives the economy, it turns the tide on climate change, and it makes the friggin' wars for oil obsolete. How does it pay for itself? Well, we don't need then 1,000 military bases in over 100 countries around the world that are mainly safeguarding our energy supplies and their routes of transportation. Instead, we put people to work, so we're not putting anybody out of a job. In fact, we're creating jobs that are far safer for workers, far healthier for workers, especially who are really on the firing line in so many of these fossil fuel, nuclear, and military jobs that expose people to very dangerous things that pollute our water supply and our air and our communities and are dangerous for everybody, whole world over, from the beginning to the end of this supply chain. So we convert that entire supply chain and we convert those jobs, and we ensure that a just transition is key to this plan for workers and for communities, so that you don't lose jobs, you gain jobs. And you not only give it up on the jobs that kill workers and kill communities, we create jobs that are actually healthy for workers and for communities and for our economy and for the planet and for global peace and security. So this is a win-win. We now spend $1 trillion a year on the bloated and dangerous military budget. Is it making us safer? I don't think so. According to a recent Harvard study, we have spent $6 trillion on Iraq and Afghanistan alone. $6 trillion comes down to, guess how much? This is by the time we've paid for the medical expenses for our wounded soldiers. $6 trillion comes down to $75,000 per American household on average that we will have paid for these wars. Can you think of a few things you might have done with $75,000 in your household, like pay for college, or keep a roof over your heads, or afford health care? The American people don't know this. Very few people know that 54% of our discretionary budget is going to the bloated military. And do you know what the next biggest line item is after 54%? It's 7%, okay? Our discretionary budget is military, and it has a few footnotes around the side for other things. How much are we getting out of this? What we've gotten are failed states, mass refugee migrations, which are tearing apart Europe and the Middle East, and worse, terrorist threats. The head of the NSA himself acknowledged that the other day when he said, oh my God, we're actually not making progress here. ISIS is even worse than Al-Qaeda. And, you know, where did ISIS come from? It came from the chaos of Iraq in particular, but also the disaster in Libya, which unleashed a whole pack of arms that then flowed to whoever. And who led the charge for Libya? None other than Hillary Clinton. Will I feel safe and secure if Hillary Clinton gets the nomination? No, and we should not. People say to me, well, won't you feel terrible if you get Donald Trump elected? First of all, I won't be getting Donald Trump elected. I will be providing the resistance to Donald Trump, because Hillary Clinton doesn't. One of the reasons my campaign, our campaign, needs to be in the debates is because Hillary Clinton cannot make the arguments. She cannot stand up against Donald Trump. She cannot stand up as a proponent of the billionaire club. She cannot stand up against rule by a billionaire. She cannot stand up against the, his entire agenda, offshoring our jobs, because she has been offshoring our jobs. And Donald, despite what he says, has been offshoring his jobs as well, and mistreating his workers, and preying upon innocent students, and tricking them out of their dollars and their investments, and basically, milking taxpayers for bailouts over and over again. What is Donald's economic plan? It's to go out and be a strong man and get us good deals. Well, he's got a track record of failed deals all behind him. So Donald is not the solution. Donald is obviously very dangerous, but Hillary Clinton is not the solution to Donald. For all the terrible things Donald talks about, embroiling us in disastrous wars. Well, what more disastrous war is there than Libya, which Hillary led the way on, and Iraq, which she strongly approved of? Donald is scary if he might have his finger on the nuclear weapons. Well, what does Hillary Clinton want to do in Syria? She wants to start an air war with Russia by declaring a no-fly zone. Going to war with a nuclear-armed power that she has actually provoked by supporting the movement of missiles, bases, and troops to Russia's border has not positioned us well to be able to de-escalate conflicts with Russia. This is a very dangerous thing to have Hillary Clinton in the driver's seat on nuclear weapons. And who is it that created a whole new generation of nuclear weapons and restarted the nuclear arms race? That's Barack Obama, who created this new $1 trillion plan for nuclear weapons and submarines and missiles and bombers. So that makes for some jobs, but we can have better jobs that are far safer for workers, communities, our nation, and the planet through the Green New Deal. So bottom line is that Hillary is not the solution to Donald. In fact, putting another Clinton in the White House will only fan the flames of the right-wing extreme movement. Where did that movement come from? The economic stress and misery that people have experienced in recent decades. Where did that come from? Well, a lot of it had to do with NAFTA that sent our jobs overseas. Thank you, Bill Clinton, and thank you, Hillary Clinton, for promoting it and advocating for it. And much of this economic misery also comes from Wall Street deregulation. And again, thank you, Bill and Hillary Clinton, for that Wall Street deregulation that disappeared 9 million jobs and allowed 5 million homes to basically be stolen out from under their owners. So more Clinton neoliberalism, that is austerity, that is giving over the goods to the economic elite and depriving we the people of the foundations of a decent economy and society. More Clintonism is going to just fan the flames of the economic desperation that is lifting up demagogues like Donald Trump. So the bottom line there is that this politics of fear that tells you to vote against what you're afraid of rather than for what you believe, that politics of fear has actually delivered everything we were afraid of. If you actually look at the track record, lesser evilism and all the reasons you were told to support the lesser evil. You didn't want the expanding wars. You didn't want the attack on immigrants. You didn't want the expanding massive prison system and the police state that we have with the assault on our civil liberties. All of that we've gotten by the droves because we allowed ourselves to be silenced by this intimidation campaign. Before I wrap up, just a couple other quick mentions about what we can do when we liberate young people to help us lead the way forward with the votes that it will take that can actually win this election. What else can we do? We can create health care as a human right through an improved Medicare for All system. Without spending a penny more, we can ensure that everybody is covered, everybody in, nobody out, head to toe, cradle to grave. We just drop the point of eligibility for Medicare, and we patch up Medicare because it's had a lot of holes knocked into it. It needs to be a comprehensive package. And then we just drop that age of eligibility to the moment of conception, so everyone is covered throughout life and completely. It doesn't cost us any money. We just move this $500 billion a year that's spent on basically paper pushing, advertising, and CEO salaries, and we put healthcare dollars into real healthcare and make it a human right. We also call for education as a human right and fully funding our schools. And thank you to our green leadership here, right here in Connecticut, that are helping to fight these battles on the front lines. And what we're calling for is full funding for our schools and for actually teaching to the whole student for lifetime learning, not to a downgraded, high-stakes test that deconstructs education in a way that's great if you happen to be a testing company or you're looking to close down the school and declare it, you know, a dead school. The testing strategy is basically a strategy for disempowering schools, for disempowering communities. We need to focus on poverty as the biggest obstacle to education and eliminate poverty as part of the Green New Deal, and ensure that young people are coming to school ready to learn. That means healthy, with health care. That means housed. That means with their parents employed. That means getting rid of the pollution, which is also very harmful to how kids can think. It ensures that kids aren't coming with untreated asthma, that they're living not only with health care, but in a community that doesn't have the pollution that's causing their untreated asthma to start with. So we can ensure that kids are coming to school ready to learn and that they have the class size that they need in order to learn, because the architects of education reform do not follow their own advice. The likes of Barack Obama and Arne Duncan and Rahm Emanuel, you can be sure their kids are not going to these privatized schools where they are subjected to high-stakes testing in large classrooms. Their kids are going to schools that pay their teachers well, that have small classroom size, and where education is full of art and music and recreation and community engagement. That's what real education looks like, and that's what we're demanding. We can also put an end to this crisis of police violence and racist brutality. It's not rocket science how to do that. The report coming out of Ferguson was pretty clear. Every community deserves to have a civilian review board, so communities control their police, not have police controlling their communities. We also need full-time investigators so that every death at the hands of police is investigated. It shouldn't require a miracle in the Department of Justice to actually look into why somebody was killed in police custody. So we can create accountability in this system. The city of Richmond, California, which had a green mayor for 8 years until she termed out, was a great example of how we can address police brutality. And she brought in a commissioner who was very community-oriented, who moved into the community, who hired a police force that looks like the community, that comes from similar communities, and that lives in the community. And they trained police, particularly in de-escalation. They worked to demilitarize their force, unlike, say, in Cleveland now, where the feds provided $50 million for more police to come in, more militarization, more riot gear, more rifles. They're walking around with assault rifles and sniper rifles in Cleveland, you know? What does that say about the agenda that they're promoting in Cleveland, that they need to defend it with an armed occupying force? We need to demilitarize our police. There are countries around the world, in fact, that have completely disarmed the police, and we need to take a close look at that. Because when police are not carrying guns, like in the UK, like in Iceland, like in China, it turns out everybody is safer, even in countries where civilians are highly armed and are carrying guns. When the police are not carrying guns, it turns out there's just a whole lot less shooting. And the police themselves are a whole lot safer if they're not armed. So we need to take a look at that as part of moving towards greater demilitarization, teaching people how to de-escalate as their first strategy rather than to pull out their gun and pull the trigger as the first thing. And we need to move towards disarmament. Right now our societies have become garrison states, and everybody's armed, so there's an incredible incentive to shoot first, and that's an awful lot of what's going on now out there. So we really need to lay down our arms. In order to lay down our arms, we also need to address the underlying fears of racism, which is a living legacy of the criminal institution of slavery on which this country was founded. The crisis in policing doesn't stand alone. We also have a crisis of racism in our economy, in our school system, in jobs, in education, and in health, in every sector of society. So we call for a Truth and Reconciliation Commission to actually get down to this underlying factor of living legacies of slavery that need to be addressed. We need to sit down and have a facilitated community process to actually understand this, get our hands around it, and put the scourge of racism behind us for once and for all. So just a couple more words to help arm you for these discussions and these challenges that you will be having about, well, aren't you throwing away your vote, aren't you just going to spoil the election, et cetera. So, one thing that is important to point out is the track record of this politics of fear, which I mentioned. That the politics of fear sounds great, sounds like it might be effective, but in fact it's only delivered everything we were afraid of. So it doesn't work. One of the reasons it doesn't work is that people stop coming out to vote for politicians who are throwing them under the bus. Even if somebody else could do it worse, people just can't motivate themselves to come out. And this is generally what's happened in the two recent midterm elections, where the base did not come out to support Democrats. So it was not a victory for Republicans. These were losses for Democrats because a lesser evil Democratic Party that was working very hard to backpedal and look as much like Republicans as they could, they massively lost it. And they lost first one house of Congress and then the other. They've been losing state houses and governorships all over the place. So the lesser evil is it's a trick, it's a trap, it's a propaganda campaign. It doesn't work, it won't get you there. It simply paves the way to the greater evil. We have no choice except to stand up and lead the way forward ourselves. We are the ones we've been waiting for. The lesser evil does not solve this for us, but in fact, we have the power to build our strength, our numbers, and we have the agenda that most people are actually clamoring for right now. So, for all those reasons, we say we have to stand up. But there's another reason we have to stand up. In this election, we are not simply deciding what kind of a world we will have, but whether we will have a world or not at all. Whether you look at climate change, where this recent report from NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, they recently commented at a conference of insurance companies. This hasn't been widely reported yet because this was just a verbal report. They'll be rolling this out over the course of the next year. But they had just received a report from Antarctica that they described as an oh my God report. What was the oh my God report? That we are headed for 9 feet of sea level rise as soon as 2050. Anybody plan to be here in 2050 or have a kid that might be around in 2050? I think probably everybody. So as you know, this isn't something we can wait till 2050 in order to fix. Among other things, we could see a whole lot of flooding, like right around here in coastal areas. Actually, the disappearance of most coastal population centers. New York, Manhattan, Florida, Bangladesh. Places all around the world are going to go underwater, and a lot of nuclear power plants are going to go Fukushima. And it takes a long time to decommission a nuclear power plant. So we got to decide, are we either preparing to lose 9 feet of sea level, or are we going to prevent that crisis? Because there's no way we can survive that crisis. It's estimated there would be something like 600 million climate refugees, in addition to the 65 million war refugees that we can't handle right now, which is already a human rights catastrophe. So we can't do that, you know. And in my view, when people say, are you frightened of Donald Trump? Well, I'm more frightened of climate change. And Hillary Clinton, unfortunately, has been a big promoter of climate change in spite of the lip service. She's been promoting fracking around the world, as has the whole Democratic plan of all of the above. Because nature doesn't care about renewable energy. Nature cares about fossil fuels. That's what nature reads in the atmosphere. So all of the above has actually been a disaster. The Democrats are not the solution on climate change, they are not the solution on war, and they are not the solution on nuclear weapons. That's what I'm afraid of, not Donald Trump. He's not different from Hillary Clinton on each of those issues. So what we say, you know, is the clock is ticking. We have to be the moral compass. Democracy needs a moral compass. If we just silence ourselves, we create a moral vacuum and inrush the political predators, and the rest is history. And we're all about to be history unless we stand up and we change history by saying no, by rejecting the lesser evil and fighting for the greater good like our lives depend on it, because they do. The bottom line is we can have an America and a world that works for all of us, that puts people, planet, and peace over profit. The power to create that world is not just in our hopes, it's not just in our dreams. Right here and now, it's in this room. That power is in our hands. We together are unstoppable. Let's make it so. Thank you so very much for all you do.